done quite a bit of work around the issue of student debt and addressing student debt in Canada. It is a significant problem where we see currently student debt has surpassed $15 billion, and that's just the federal amount. That doesn't include provincial debt, that doesn't include private loans, credit cards, or anything like that. Currently, we are working on our Education Shouldn't Be a Death Sentence campaign. So we've developed an organizing manual around the campaign, created materials and videos to supplement that as well, and also address student debt as part of our lobby week efforts when meeting with politicians such as MPs and senators to talk about different ways that we can solve the debt issue and the reason that we need to tackle it in the first place. In terms of future plans, that's hard to talk about because the way that our organization works is the direction for our campaigns and the work that we do is set by the membership. So we have 2 meetings every year where folks come together from across the country to discuss the different issues that we face as students in Canada. But some of the ways that we're going to continue is with the student is it shouldn't be a debt sentence. Education Shouldn't Be a Death Sentence campaign, and expanding that and looking how we can further integrate it into the other work that we do and make that a highlight and a focus for the next coming year leading up to the federal election. Because one of our lobby requests is actually for the federal government to eliminate and cut the student debt that currently exists in half, which is a significant investment of about $7.5 billion. Spread over 3 years. But in addition to that, to address further student debt, one of the suggestions that we had was to eliminate the current tax breaks that are available for post-secondary students and the RESP savings programs and schemes, and actually take the funding for that and put it back into the Canada Student Grants Program, because the amount that's currently being addressed with those 2 programs in terms of the tax breaks and the savings schemes actually could eliminate the need for the Canada Student Loans Program, because that number is larger than what's given out by Canada Student Grants. So continuing to push that message and working with the Education Shouldn't Be a Death Sentence campaign. So the way that we work with our members is we are membership based. In regards to debt, we do a combination of working together with local student unions at their campuses and also working with, to apply pressure to both the provincial and federal governments, because the way that education works is while funding is received directly from the federal government, it is the provincial government who dictates what tuition fees are like, their own provincial loan system. They also set up the framework for post-secondary education in Canada within each individual province. So it is working on multiple tiers when addressing the issue of student debt. How do we challenge our Board of Governors? How do we challenge our provincial governments? And the biggest thing that we're working on right now as well is pushing for a Post-Secondary Education Act, which would actually be similar to the Canada Health Act, where education would be regulated federally and the funding would be direct towards post-secondary education versus in the Canada Social Transfer Tax. So rather than getting a lump and provinces deciding where to go, it would be a direct transfer towards post-secondary education, so funding would be the same across the board. So we are working at multiple levels when trying to address student debt. I think it's difficult to address what we're most proud of because the issue is I'm not the CFS. The executives in this office and the work that we do is not the CFS. The CFS are all of our individual members, and that's what comprises the Canadian Federation of Students, because we are membership based. And I think for me, what I'm most proud of myself as a deputy chairperson and looking at the work that we've done is how we continue to be a force within the student movement and how we continue to challenge these notions despite, all the work that's been done against us with, governments deregulating and defunding education back in the 1990s, not addressing the funding shortfalls and not addressing, the need to deal with buildings falling apart, commercialization of research. All these things are constantly being thrown at us, but yet we, as a movement together, continue the work that we do and continue fighting and continue to see successes over the years and victories for students, and we're going to continue that fight, and that's something that I personally am very proud of. there are a lot of obstacles in fighting to lower student debt. The biggest one obviously is dealing with the federal government and dealing with a majority government at the moment. It's hard to apply that pressure when you have a party who's very in sync in what they want to do. For folks that don't know, there was a cap at how high the debt ceiling could be. In years past, it was $15 billion. The debt could not rise above that. And when we were approaching that number, rather than addressing the issue and finding a way to lower it, the federal government instead just raised the debt ceiling to $19 billion and continued student debt to allow it to rise. We're seeing folks who are dealing with repayment assistance programs who can't make a single payment on their student loans, and I think that's a significant obstacle, which is why we want to continue applying pressure to the federal government and the provincial governments to say that we need to take concrete and serious steps in addressing the current debt load, and also how do we prevent future debt loads from getting out of hand. Why are tuition fees the highest in Ontario? Political decisions. So, as folks may or may not know, each province regulates its own tuition fee structure and post-secondary education framework structure. So it is the provincial governments that decide how much they want to invest in post-secondary education, and we've seen over the last couple of years that tuition fees in Ontario have continued to rise and rise and rise. Without some sort of addressing of how to deal with that problem. They did try to develop, the provincial government did promise a 30% reduction, which turned out not to be a reduction, but instead a grant that only 2 of every 9 Ontarians actually qualified for in terms of those enrolled in post-secondary education. So it was very misleading, which also relates to the issue of debt. When you're seeing the average student in Ontario paying over $7,000 per year for a full-time course load for tuition fees, if you think about that over the next couple of years, plus books, plus course fees, and whatever other fees, and that's just the average that I'm talking about. You're seeing in Ontario, the average student debt, I believe, is over $37,000. So the reason that is, though, is because each province gets to regulate their own tuition fee structure in post-secondary education. So another example is like Newfoundland, where they're considered a have-not province. The tuition fees there average just over $2,000 a year, and that's because the provincial government has decided to make a significant investment in post-secondary education. They've also eliminated interest on student loans, so there is no interest on your provincial student loans, and there's been a tuition fee freeze there for the last 10 years. So we've actually seen student debt in Newfoundland decrease because of those investments and because of those political decisions. So really, in the end, it is up to the provincial governments to make a decision on how they want to fund education and how they want to prioritize that. And unfortunately, in Ontario, we've seen that year after year after year, tuition fees just continue to rise because of those political decisions, and as such, student debt is the highest in Ontario as well.